of GRTC. And I believe there are no formal public comments that were submitted last night. Is that correct? Julie?
That is correct. There were no public comments.
All right, hold on a minute. I got a volume problem here. Okay, I think I'm going to read into the record a letter we received from the President of the Union this morning. Dear GRTC Board of Directors, as we all know, COVID-19 has caused great fear and frustration due to the uncertainty of the virus, how it may be transmitted, and no vaccine and or cure in sight. As GRTC workers, we are essential. Thus, we're on the front line and in direct contact with the public daily 3 months currently, along with our daily personal fears of catching the virus and bringing it home to our families, losing a limb like one of our coworkers, and Julie just referred to that, due to COVID, heightened by the increasing number of our fellow coworkers that are testing positive with COVID-19 daily. Passengers are not really required to wear masks. Hi, Danny. Hi, Bonnie. Despite GRTC giving us PPE and a one-time bonus amount, it appears that someone dropped the ball on hazard pay, which was offered at the last board meeting. My members were very disheartened recently when the bus service was stopped due to a bus being set on fire by protesters in response to police brutality and structural racism. We are asking you to please consider giving the employees hazardous pay and passenger rules. Thank you for taking the time to read my correspondence. Thank you, President Maurice Carter, GRTC employees and passengers. And there were a number of names attached to a petition. I was not able to count them. But anyway, we received that this morning, and we will, of course, address most of that today. Julie, why don't you repeat if you can, say what the limited amount you said about the allegation of someone losing a limb due to COVID.
Yes, there's a limited amount of information I can provide on that due to HIPAA law, but we were informed that there was a staff member who was out for other reasons, who has not been working, and for other complications and other illnesses, and that during the course of his treatment, this person did also get COVID, and through the course of that complication, that's about all I can say, but it certainly wasn't here work related, and we have a lot of very great sympathy, and we're very disheartened of this very tragic loss for him, because it is a significant loss when someone loses a limb or a function of how they operate. So just wanted to clarify that, yes, we understand there was that tragedy, but it did not happen during the work environment or on the job.
All right, thank you. And since this letter does also refer to two requests, one is hazardous pay, which we will be dealing with today, I know, and the other is passenger rules. At some point, if you would comment on that statement, it would be helpful.
Would you like me to comment on that now?
Sure.
Okay. Under the governor's executive order, masks are required in public spaces. We have also issued that mandate that masks are required on the bus. So it is actually in effect that masks are required on our bus. The issue isn't the requirement of having them on the bus. The issue is enforcing them. And in order to enforce them, our operators would then have to interact directly with passengers, putting them in direct risk. So because our operators are not police, they're not trained in police enforcement, we haven't asked them to enforce that. We have, however, given them to date over 18,000 masks to hand out to the public, and another 18,000 on the way just this past couple of weeks, not including the 2,000 we gave several weeks ago. So in total, over 40,000 masks that we have acquired between what we purchased and FTA gave to us for our operators to be able to give to passengers for them to use on to help with the compliance of mask wearing. But while it's required, the issue isn't the requirement. The issue is how to enforce.
How do we make the requirement known?
The requirement is known in multiple ways. On every bus, there's a sign on each of the doors that says it's required. We put it on all social media. It's actually in the bus itself, says that it's required. And we're also starting to change the destination signs. We talked about last night. The destination signs currently say essential trips only as it's rolling through. and we're having discussions now about changing that to also put in so that it's mask required. But whenever anyone steps on a bus, the sign is right there on the door.
All right, thank you. Any further questions from the board on that? All right. Okay, so how about the board minutes then? I'd like a motion to approve the minutes.
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, corrections? All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, they are approved. So we will move immediately to the agenda. Looks like the first thing is Barbara Jaycox. Hi, Barbara. And Adrian and the Transit Vision Plan update from the TPO.
Hello.
Hi.
How's everybody this morning?
Great.
I'm very pleased to be here with you. I'm from the Richmond Region Transportation Planning Organization, and we were last with you on January 21st, 2020, to give you an update on the Transit Vision Plan near-term strategic technical analysis. I believe the slides are coming up.
Yes.
Yes, I'm working on it. It disappeared for some reason.
Okay.
Sorry about that, Barbara.
That's all right. That was just the title slide.
Should be it. Can you see it now?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and that's fine. You can leave it right there because the next slide, just wanted to remind you the study purpose is to identify recommendations for the high frequency routes that can be implemented in the near term to advance the long-term vision that was set by the vision plan in 2017. Next slide. We're toward the end of a year-long look at a progressive analysis of all the routes that were in the transit vision plan and narrowing down on those that we feel are most likely to be implemented. Next slide. And when we talked to you in January, we narrowed it down from all the corridors to the 12 that were selected for implementation feasibility that are shown here in purple. And now, next slide, we're through even more detailed screening on ridership potential and also those that will actually be served, transit dependent, et cetera, to population centers, employment centers. And we're now down to the final 5, which are shown here in purple for the cost analysis. Next slide. We made some, and we're being assisted by Kimberly Horn, an excellent team that's been working hand in glove with us and our steering committee.
So Barbara,
yes.
would you just go on and identify those 5 by name now so that we're fully aware of that?
Okay, they are Broad Street Short Pump and is Route A. Midlothian Turnpike is Route D. West End South is E.
What is that? West End South is on
West End South is a combination of routes that are, I don't have the full, can we go back a slide? It might describe it a little better, and you can see downtown to Regency Square.
All right.
Essentially. And
Thank
then the airport via Route 60. There are different ways to get to the airport that we looked at. There are 4 different service options. And Route 1 to Ashland is H. Those are the 5.
All right, thank you. Except this one stops at Parham Road on this first thing,
Yes, these are, we tried to look at what segments seem to be the most feasible in this initial near-term look. So it's not necessarily the full corridors as outlined originally in the study.
Thank you.
Okay. Next slide. So we established service plan assumptions. We looked at 2 different scenarios. 7-day-a-week service, looked at the corridors that would be built on top of our current network. We're not talking about reinventing a whole new network. And ultimately, the recommended service charges are subject to, of course, to GRTC approval and funding, and use the GRTC cost of service mile estimate of $7.63. Those are the basic assumptions. So next slide. So we wanted to share by way of illustration a view of a combination of two routes, high priority routes that are called for in the study by our steering committee, and that will connect Parham, as you can see, with the extension of the Chamberlain-Wilmer route, the 1A, 1B, and 1C. It would be extended to as far as Parham, and then to the south. It will go, of course, through the city of Parham and Henrico, and through the city down to Chesterfield. Next slide. And combined with the extension, the proposed extension of Corridor D, Midlothian Turnpike, to all the way down Midlothian, ultimately to Chesterfield Town Center in this phase that we are talking about from a cost analysis. Next slide, please. And one way to look at the capital cost continuum, of course, we have lots of different assumptions that go into each one of these boxes in terms of how much the unit prices are for how much a bus would cost, all the way through sidewalk, a range of sidewalk costs, and the assumptions that were made. Sidewalks on the far end can be phased, and that would be, of course, in partnership with the localities. But for the very basic required for revenue service, for each of these, we would need additional buses, and of course the bus stops would be signed, and that would be a given in any extension of routes. So next slide, please. We can get into an example of Route H, or what we're calling H for Route 1 North. You can see the various alternatives for the number of buses, the vehicle cost, the bus stop amenities, sidewalks. You can see the biggest variance, a low of 6 million to 11 million. That's assuming sidewalks outside the city limits on both sides of the roadway. So of course, there's some variability there. Intersection improvements, all signalized intersections, and transit signal priority types of improvements that are varied as well. So let's get in, next slide, to the range of capital costs. And you can see there's a wide range of costs because of the extent of amenities, the sidewalks, all those factors that can be phased over time. But we are looking at, if you look at the overall for all 5 of those routes, it could be a low of $10.5 million up to a very high of $118 million. These are just kind of giving you those bumper guards on either side of looking at the cost of capital impacts that would be required to address these 5 routes all at one time. And then next slide, range of operating costs. Of course, the same with operating, but not as much of a variance based on the 2 different service options and service plans. But there were also 4 service plans proposed for airport Route 60. So that's why a little bit more of a variance in that, but anywhere from 8 to 13.5 million. So where do we go from here? We have implementation, which is, very dependent on funding. The study also addresses all the different types of funding that could be pursued, and that would include, the normal sources of funds that we have available, federal, state, and through the TPO, through our distribution of federal and state funds. And then we have, of course, the Central Virginia Transportation Authority, which is still in formation as we speak. But getting down to those details is really important to understand through corridor planning, working with the localities and through the CVTA. How do we really prioritize them and plan for the specific bus stop locations, specific intersection improvements, and prioritize technology improvements that would make for a good system and an expansion of the network. And then go through procurement of the vehicles and design and construction of improvements. So next slide. Where do we go from here? Today we are briefing you all. This won't be the last time you hear from us. We still will take all of this back to the steering committee one more time. And it also goes to our technical advisory committee, made up of all the localities and federal and state agencies. That will happen sometime in probably July, and then go back to our policy board by September, finalize the report, and hopefully will serve as a foundation for the transit planning work of GRTC and those partners. So are there any questions? I'd be happy to answer them. This is a really high level look, and I can always take questions back as well.
So Barbara, my understanding of the recent state legislation is that the CVTA is to be presented a plan for the use of additional funds coming in from the tax.
Correct.
And that plan is supposed to be approved by both GRTC and the TPO. Am I correct?
That is my understanding, yes.
All right. So at some point, you would need formal approval from our management and our board in order for this to go to the CVTA.
To be used as that foundation.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or thoughts? This is a quiet step in an enormous achievement. And, 5 years ago, we had no plan for serious expansion and no money for it. Today, we actually are in process of doing a plan. You may note that there's at least one second route in Chesterfield County, Danny. And Gary and Ian, and a route that's proposed that's long desired, which is one out the east end, out Route 60, which the Fulton people have made very clear that they want. So it's really something, although it just kind of quietly slides in, and we hope there's some revenue to support it. Barbara, as the CVTA, do you know when they will be stood up, and do you know anything about them?
Well, July 1 is the effective date. October, I believe, is when, well, the effective date for the tax revenues, and then I think October is when we actually will start to see the formation of an executive board. I think in the meantime, we will be serving as staff, and we'll be working very closely, of course, with Julie and others through the summer.
Okay.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for your work and for this report.
And Mr. Campbell, if I may,
Mm-hmm.
there's a second part of this presentation that Adrian will be giving that's talking about our some of the challenges and the strategy for implementing some of these.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
All right, now that Barbara has laid out a nice plan, we're going to talk about some of the needs to get us there. So looking at both short-term FY21 and FY22. All right, so last board meeting, we gave you guys a high-level overview of what our loads looked like during COVID, and we put together some route enhancements that we thought would help continue social distancing, as well as continue into maybe FY22, some enhancements we'd also need. So on the left, we have the COVID-19 expansion plan, and on the right actually is Barbara's vision plan phase 2 that she just went over. You'll actually see some of the red and orange routes are very similar. The red and orange are our loads that are high, and then that's the call for high frequency routes on the red. Below, the table shows the actual routes for FY22 expansion, which is the phase 2, the Route 19, the peak service for 15 minutes. In FY21, we had the Route 2A that we wanted increased frequency. The 7A and 7B called for increased frequency both for the FY21 and FY22. The Pulse, we recommended increasing frequency. The Route 1, which Barbara also went over, the extension both in Midlothian as well as north up to Henrico County. We're proposing the Route 5 increased frequency, and then the Route 3B increased frequency. This is kind of the full spectrum of menu items that we looked at in various scenarios to be considered for FY21 and FY22. So as we looked at them, we looked at what we needed to get there. So this is the same table. Listing on the left is the description, and then I have in it the amount of vehicles as well as the amount of operators that are required. As of today, and I'm going to go ahead and go down to this pink line down here where it says we have a current count of usable vehicles of 142. Our peak base right now for FY21 is 113 vehicles. Each of the different alternatives has the enhancement amount of vehicles needed. So in both FY22 expansion and FY21, it increases to a need of 133 peak vehicles. Our spare ratio is 20% is what is required, so that brings it up to 27 vehicles needed.
Got some sound problems
do
here.
All the enhancements between the one. Oh no.
Hold on a second, Adrian. Is anybody else having sound issues? Yeah.
Is that better? Can you hear me?
We lost you.
Hear you now.
Rob, we okay?
It's
Yes,
good.
sir, we're fine. Go ahead, Adrian.
Okay, sorry about that. It said unstable. So you can see the delta between the total projected need for FY21 and FY22, if we were to do all the proposals for scenarios, is a difference of 142 and the 160. So we need vehicles.
Adrian,
similar story.
Adrian, this list of changes is not exactly the same as the one Barbara produced, is it?
No, what is laid out here, it includes Barbara's recommendations, but it also some of the carryovers that we discussed with the FY21.
Okay. Sound problem again.
Is that better? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. It does include additional enhancements that we identified based on our frequency needs.
Right.
And same for operators. So FY21, you'll see we have 265 as our peak amount of positions that we need for the duties. And each of the different scenarios has the amount that we would need to enhance it. So our total projected need is 292. Currently, Tim looks for an extra board need of about 35 to cover any leaves. And then on top of that, the total projected need for that would be 327. So that is quite a big difference from our current of 286. Addition to vehicles and operators is, well, if we get all those vehicles, where can we put them? So in here, I've just identified the 2 parcels that we own that have kind of room for adding onto or some sort of maintenance, fuel, or storage. The back one is currently our paratransit lot, the top left corner. The bottom right is the church lot, which we've discussed what is the next steps for that and are currently analyzing. But maintenance, expanding that facility, adding another fueling tank, and then storage as well for the vehicles, but not just the vehicles, another capital enhancement. And then articulated vehicles, we've been having conversations over the last few months about articulated vehicles which would add capacity, not just on our Pulse route, but if we continue expansion on another corridor like the Route 1 and loads increase for that as well, we would like to be able to use the articulated vehicles for those routes. But the step one we know is the Pulse stations. So what this little stations, the blue lines are what are called the knee walls. So those are 2 brick walls that lead into the ramps. Those, you can see the current 40-foot vehicle right there. It fits nicely right within it, which works for that vehicle. But if you add in a 60-foot bus, which is the bottom vehicle, you'll see it just brushes that back door. So that would have to be removed. And then for aesthetic purposes, we would like to remove both the knee walls. And second issue is you can see in the bottom right corner, I have a little picture that's showing the knee wall, but it also shows the back of the bus and the concrete pad as of today. The concrete pad would have to be expanded because a 60-foot vehicle, of course, would go right into the asphalt. And the wear and tear on that would be pretty immediate as far as what we would do to the asphalt. So all 26 stations would need some sort of concrete expansion. And that's just our quick analysis. There may be more as we look into it. So what is next and some additional enhancement needs. Barbara went over the original transit plan related to the vision plan. We'll have to, they're going to be completing the costs related to that capital 5 regional high frequency routes in FY20 Barbara went over. And
you're in trouble again, Adrian. Hold on a second.
And then the CVTA, which was also discussed. We have been coordinating for that to be added to the TAC to develop a subcommittee. And as you mentioned, Reverend Campbell, we'll be having a subcommittee or a steering committee that will start discussing all the stuff from the vision plan, as well as any other, the TDP and how that fits into a transit plan. So that is kind of the next step related to that for CVTA. And then related to capital, we'll have to do corridor plan for design and funding of any enhanced infrastructure. So quite a lot to accomplish before we implement any of these. Questions?
Hey, this is Danny. I have a question. Looking back to the first or one of the early slides here, where you show the increase needed for vehicle and operator.
Yes.
Why does the projected spare ratio need create 35 operator needs? Because it's spare. Just trying to understand.
So in this particular, I kept the title, but that's more of an extra board need. So for if people are on leave and they already have their positions assigned, let's say they're out on vacation, someone's going to have to cover their spot.
I understand.
Different scenarios like that.
Okay.
So we've got, I saw some numbers, of course, on what Barbara did for the 5 expansions that that we discussed with the CVTA would be looking at. And then we have, do you have any idea how much more this list is than that list of 5? I mean, you started with these expansions we'd been talking about, which were often frequency issues. It looks like I was looking at 8.5 million operating cost on the 5 potential routes that Barbara suggested. Do you have any idea what we're talking about here?
I'm going to go back to the checkoff list. Well, what you'll see is some of these aren't continued over to FY22 for expansion as far as recommendation. You'll get the X's in the boxes. It still comes out under $10 million. I would say it's still somewhere around $8.5 million for those enhancements.
Combined with the ones Barbara said, or in addition? They're combined.
Yeah, still combined. I mean, that's based on, she said, I know that's 8 million is the lowest, but.
Right, well, 13 was the top.
Right, so I would say it's under 10, but somewhere between 8.5 and 10.
Okay. Well, that's pretty impressive. Thank you so much. Other questions of Adrian? I love the planning work you guys are doing. And then we have we have significant capital needs that come along with this, as not only the new equipment necessary to handle the increased service, but also that alteration of the pulse stations to handle the articulated buses, right?
Right.
Okay, thank you. Conflict of interest, board signature, action items next. Is that right, Julie? Oh, Von Tisdale. Oh, hi.
Well, good morning.
Hey, good morning. Hey,
Good morning.
good morning.
Okay, mine is very brief. I just want to announce about the Virginia Transit Association Transit TDM Employee Unsung Hero Award. And the qualifications of that is that it's presented to an individual who has distinguished him or herself in the past year as an exceptional staff member of a member transit or TDM agency. The nominee demonstrates leadership, teamwork, dependability, professionalism, adaptability, benevolence, or any other outstanding quality with the excellence in their professional capacity, as evident to their supervisors, co-workers, customers, or to their larger community. I am pleased to announce that Sharika Ruffin, who is a 16-year team member for RideFinders and is a program manager for RideFinders, has been awarded the 2020 TDM Unsung Hero Award for meeting all of the qualifications that I cited above. And she's and has great intrinsic value to RideFinders and consistently and continuously displays notable work ethic and results that are exceptional and deserving of recognition. Hence the Unsung Hero Award. She's always in the background, but very loyal and very committed to RideFinders and GRTC. So I'm pleased to announce that she's the recipient of that award.
Thank you, Von.
Thank you. Well,
And please add our congratulations to her for this work. Clearly, somebody that we're grateful is a part of this team.
I will certainly pass that on. Thank you all as well.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks. Conflict of interest, I think.
Yes. Good morning.
Good
This
morning.
is Angela.
Hi, Angela.
Oh, good morning. So the conflict of interest policy, GRTC recognizes and respects each board member's right to engage in activities outside of his or her responsibilities as a board member. These activities are private in nature and should not in any way conflict with or reflect poorly on GRTC. The intent of the conflict of interest policy is that each member will conduct the company's business with integrity and comply with all applicable laws in a manner that excludes consideration of personal advantage or gain. Each board member shall make prompt and full disclosure in writing to the board chairman and GRTC's chief executive officer of any potential situation which may involve a conflict of interest. Board members are required to review this policy and indicate compliance with this policy on an annual basis. The recommendation is that each board member read, sign, and return the conflict of interest policy to the HR director, Angela Malloy. Any questions?
Have you sent that out already?
I believe Janice has it in the board packet.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah. Could it be sent separately? Because like right now I'm doing a PDF print out of it, and I don't know if everybody's gonna have that ability. So if you could just maybe send that out on a separate email that everyone can get without having to do a lot of different stuff.
We'll make that happen.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Angela.
Just a question. Can we email it as opposed to, when you say mail it, can we copy it and email it to you?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, we'll look forward to it.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Will digital signatures be okay on that one?
Yes.
Okay, great.
What kind of signatures?
Digital.
Okay. Carrie, certification of appreciation to community.
Good morning.
Good morning.
During the COVID-19 emergency, members of our community have donated various items to GRTC to support our ongoing operations as we provide critical service to the public. From face masks to snack packs, these gestures are thoughtful and deeply appreciated by our staff. We continue to receive donations, but as of June 8th, we compiled a list of our donors and the items that they've donated, which is included in your board packet. The recommendation is that the Board of Directors authorizes the board chair and the CEO to sign these certificates of appreciation, which say, GRTC is deeply grateful for your donations during COVID-19 to support our operations during this incredibly difficult time. Your thoughtfulness is sincerely appreciated, end quote. Certificates will be printed and mailed or digitally shared with all of our donors. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Any questions on this? Yeah, it's pretty amazing, the courtesy and thoughtfulness that a lot of people have shown in this time. And we are grateful.
And Mr. Chairman, this is an action item.
It is? Okay. Motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Second? All in favor of expressing this form of appreciation to those persons who have helped us during this time, please say aye.
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 All opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you. All right, let's see. What's next here? Operations report. Tim Barham.
Yes, good morning.
Hi, Tim.
Starting with the overview of the KPIs, for fixed route OTP was at 69.20% compared to April, which was 69.40%, pretty much in the same range as it was this past month. However, we did have some impacts to the OTP towards the end of the month, especially starting on the 29th of May, which was that Friday. That's when the protest started, which impacted our service throughout that weekend. So that Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday, of course, we had no service at all. So the OTP was affected somewhat, and continues into June due to the protests. The lost trips was impacted as well, primarily due to the protests also. We lost 1,077 trips, which is about double what we did last month in terms of lost trips. And like I said, for the same reasons, primarily due to the protests, during that period, we either have to hold buses or we have to detour. And in some cases, we had to shut down altogether. As far as, the lost time rate, next absenteeism we track, was 16.34% compared to 16.24% from last month. So pretty much about the same there. We continue to manage that as best we can. A lot of that is COVID related due to different scenarios of people being out for various reasons. As far as that goes, I think we've had at least 11% of our workforce out just for that reason alone. We continue to manage it and adjust as best we can to make sure we get as much work covered on a regular basis. Customer complaints did go up this past month, 1.28 per 10,000 riders compared to April, which was 0.65. So it's back to our normal range as we have been tracking over the last several months. But like I said, we continue to make sure that we do our best to cut down on those complaints by providing good service as best we can. Looking at the FITS report, course ridership continues to be on the decline due to COVID. For fixed route, it was for this month 21.86% compared to April 20.82%. Pulse was down 53.13% compared to last month, which was 55.66%. Commuter express service down 93.3% compared to 89.6% for April. And combined, all of our fixed route service was down 32.01%. Route 111, I know there was some interest as far as how Route 111 has been tracking. We started that route the week of March the 15th, Coincidentally, that was the same week that the COVID initiatives went into effect. But that also happened to be our highest week of ridership. We had 841 riders during that week, first week of the service, the novelty and the newness of it. But as with the rest of our service, there was a steady decline throughout the rest of March and also through the month of April. We had our lowest point the last week in April. We were at 514, but we started to see some increase in the month of May. We were in the 600 to 700 in terms of ridership each week during the month of May. So that route is starting to see a little bit of an increase, and hopefully that'll continue as we get into the summer. For care, our care service, it was down 56.40% for the month of May compared to last month, which was 58.23%. And care on demand was down 51% compared to 57.88%. Decline on the care side is actually slowed slightly. So we are seeing a gradual increase in the ridership on the care part of the service. So as service and openings continue to take place throughout the region, that will carry over, I'm sure, to some degree on fixed route over the next few weeks as well. But for the year, this is our first month that we actually did have a decline from year to date, minus 1.11%. Compared to this time last year for the same period. So, that momentum that we had the first part of the year up until March has caught up with us over these last few months. I mentioned specialized earlier, Spectran Care, the service from an on-time standpoint was at 94.98%, just under 95%, which is about where it was last month. So we continue to run a pretty efficient operation as far as the care side. Some of the COVID-19 initiatives and maintenance related things that we're doing to continue to address that. We're doing the cleanings of the buses every single day. OBS, we contracted with them to start back on May the 11th to assist with that as well. And all of our buses have now been installed with hand sanitizers, this spray, extra masks for customers. We're getting orders of wipes coming in as well. And, going back to the masks, for example, Julie touched on it earlier, about 40,000 masks that we've received from different sources. We had about 8,000 from the FTA. We had an order of another 20,000, and then another 2,000 on top of that, and then another 5,000. And then we had a couple of hundred from different other people from around the area. So we were really impressed with the amount of folks that came forth, and a credit to Tanya and her staff as well, to making sure that we keep those supply of masks on hand so that our operators, our customers, are able to continue with having those masks as well. And also, I wanted to mention about the driver shields. We started the installation on the shield for all the buses. We were able to procure those shields and make sure that we were able to put them on. So we went through that process. We had some samples that we went through as well to make sure that we addressed any safety related issues as far as any glare or anything of that nature. So hopefully, as the next weeks come ahead, we'll be able to have our entire fleet installed with those shields. And that does include the paratransit fleet as well. As far as staffing, we are right now at 274 full-time and 21 part-time operators. The class that started on April, about half of them will be graduating this week. The remaining, hopefully, will graduate in the next week or so. We have a class that will be starting date of July the 6th. We have started back advertising and recruiting. We're limited on where we can go from a recruitment standpoint, but we do have some interviews scheduled this week because, as Adrian mentioned, with the service projections coming up, we want to continue to make sure that from an operations side that we have those resources necessary. It's still going to be a challenge because, as I mentioned earlier, as we continue with testing, I didn't mention earlier that we do have on-site testing for all of our employees with BetterMed that started last week, and And we have another testing on-site date scheduled for this week as well. And that's going to continue for the unforeseeable future. And that will unfortunately affect the work as well, because when people get tested, in some cases, they may stay out until the results come back. Some folks are quarantined or self-quarantined for a 14-day period. So we still have to deal with those challenges. But the most important thing is that we, do everything we can to make sure our employees are safe. And that is one initiative that we're going to continue to do going forward. And that concludes my portion of the report. Any questions?
So, Mr. Barham, you have this wonderful kind of quiet way of giving reports, and your the issues of operations over the last month have been extraordinary. And I just want to congratulate you and the entire staff for dealing with the disruptions and unpredictabilities and incendiary realities of the last 30 days as we tried to be an essential part of the community's life and yet also protect our people and our equipment. So thank you so much for that work. And I really think in terms of the series of emergencies that we've dealt with, the kind of sober way in which you all have dealt with this is really incredible.
And the credit really goes to those frontline workers.
Absolutely.
Thank you for those comments, Reverend Campbell.
Yeah.
No credit. Basically, I do what I have to do to make sure that, whatever needs to be done, and working with them, working with Julie and Cheryl and all the other department heads as well. Yes, I've had some sleepless nights, to the bus fire, unfortunately, and some other scenarios, weekends or whatever. It goes back to, how I was trained early in my career. So, that's what we do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yep, please.
Tim, of course, is being very humble. And while our operators receive an incredible amount of thanks and appreciation for what they're facing on the street, it would probably be a disservice if I didn't speak up now and say that what Tim and Isaac and the supervisors have done to support our operations has been immensely I just can't even begin to tell you what they have had to do to reroute our buses during protests, to help get on the street and help our passengers who have been stranded, to give that support to our operators on the street and to our passengers on the street has been extraordinarily stressful for the team here that is not seen, but keeps those buses and those operators moving. So to Tim and Isaac and all the supervisor staff who've been out there keeping and rerouting buses on the fly. Just as things progress from minute to minute, literally minute to minute, has been a truly impressive feat.
Thank you. And of course, the operators themselves have been the frontline people facing these daily risks and decisions.
Yes, sir.
Other comments? Eldridge, you got anything to say about this? I think we've had some pretty incredible work here from some folks.
Yes, absolutely. During my tenure at GRTC, we never had to face anything like this. We jumped many hurdles, but never anything like this. And I think the real credit goes to the operators and mechanics and, like Tim and Julie say, the frontline employees. They're the ones that's out there every day. They're the ones that make the wheels go around. And God knows I know, because I have walked in their shoes and I've driven the bus. Yep. So I know what I faced, but it was never anything like this. This is something that in all of my years, I've never had to deal with. So my heartfelt appreciation goes out to the operators, mechanics, and I know that the board wish that they could do it even more than what they are doing to assist them. But when you're out there, we're out there with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, any other comments? We'll move on to Tony Carter. Thanks, Tim. Mr. Carter, hello.
Good morning, everyone. Going to start off with the safety report for the month of May. In reviewing the numbers for the month of May, we did notice that the number of accidents did increase. These accidents consist of the same characteristics that we've seen over the past few months, with mirrors making contact with other mirrors on other vehicles, buses making contact with minor fixed objects such as tree branches and bus stop signs, things of that nature. The notice or the increase can be attributed to actually non-preventable accidents. And this is kind of weird because this is the first time that I've been here for where I've noticed that there's been an increase in non-preventable accidents, meaning that there's nothing the operators could do. It was just other operators of other vehicles making contact with the bus. We definitely are going to continue with the training staff to do the field observations and to have the one-on-one conversations with the operators just to go over and remind safety techniques to keep everyone as safe as possible. Like I said, we're continuously trying to have meetings and everything is within the actual confinements of the COVID to make sure that we're keeping our social distancing and going over certain things with different operators. For the month, we had 10 preventable accidents and 22 non-preventable accidents. Any questions on the safety performance report?
We actually had somebody run into a bus and disable it, correct?
Definitely, yes. Yes, sir.
All right, go ahead.
And Tim mentioned this with our COVID. What we're doing is we're trying to be transparent as we possibly can with COVID. Tim mentioned that 11% of the workforce is out, and of course, not all of those have COVID, but with the quarantine, and we're trying to be as safe as possible to keep everybody as safe as possible so we can reduce the spread and the contraction of the actual virus. Big shout out to the Human Resources Department. They're doing a wonderful job with their tracing and with their documentation of this. Of course, we have to follow the rules and regulations of HIPAA and be as private and maintain everybody's privacy, but we have to track this information because what we have is inside and outside inquiries from different agencies that want to know what's going on. With the transparency and Julie and Cheryl and everybody, we've been real open with letting everybody know once a case comes up, what we're doing to try to prevent all this, and that has to be documented. What's going on is basically once we have a possibility of someone coming down with symptoms, that is going on to a tracking sheet. They're sent home and they're sent to be tested. Once the results come back, if it is positive, it's actually tracked on a different docking sheet. At that point in time, the Human Resources Department, along with the Risk Management Department, do a tracing investigation or a data loss investigation that goes back 5 days. And what we do is contact everyone that person may have come in contact with. At that point in time, it's determined everybody could be sent home in a quarantine. And that's how it's affected the operations, as Tim was mentioning. Unfortunately, we have to be as safe as possible, and that's what we're doing. We can't risk that. So that's why, it's affecting us, unfortunately, as performance, but at the same time, we can't sacrifice the safety of anybody. And from day one of all of this, our number one objective was to keep everybody as safe as possible. Are there any questions on that?
Well, I agree with your priority, and I'm grateful for it. I think I think that's right.
Okay.
Any questions? Mr. Carter, thank you for that. Now you have another item, correct?
Yes, sir. Actually, I want to start off by saying I'm actually very happy about this. This is the 2020 GRTC Agency Safety Plan. Just to give you a little bit of background on this, on July 19, 2018, FTA published the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan final rule, which requires certain operators of public transportation systems that receive federal funds under FTA urbanized area formula grants to develop a safety plan that includes processes and procedures to implement safety management system. Basically, what we've done is we've come up with our safety management plan. Key performance indicators are the heart of this plan, and those are the numbers that we've created to actually or give us a guidance annually of where we are so far as injuries, safety of things of that nature. It's also information that's required for maintenance so far as breakdowns and overall maintenance and operations of the actual vehicles. What we're doing is, at this point, we've created the plan through the operations and maintenance department, along with other departments that had to give different information so that we could gather all this information together and come up with a way of actually managing it and how we document certain incidents and accidents. Back in, I guess it was last part of last year, we got with we contracted a consultant, Reem Lazaro, was just a wealth of knowledge. He had tons and tons of FTA and safety experience, and we got together and met with him, and he gave us some guidance on how to create this actual plan. During that time, we were able to form a team that consisted of different employees from different departments throughout GRTC, and we were able to gather a lot of information and develop a lot of information that would help us so far as the data and receiving the actual guidelines on how we're going to create this plan. Once we were able to create the plan, we were able to do different interviews with different employees and different team members of different departments and come up with ideas that we were going to implement to make the operation as great as possible overall throughout GRTC. What we've been able to do is come up with a plan on how we're going to manage that. After we came up with the plan, we went to different follow-up webinars and different follow-up workshops and things of that nature, and we were impressed because we learned that a lot of the stuff that this plan required, we already had in place at GRTC. It was just a matter of tweaking how we report certain things, how we document certain things. And after we discovered that we had a lot of that information, we decided that because of this stuff was so important to the overall safety operation here at GRTC, we went ahead and started implementing some of these things. So some of this plan we've already implemented, but what I wanted to do is just give a brief overview of where we are to let everybody know that we have completed the plan. I think the plan will be sent out for the next board meeting so you all can review it. And by the time of the board meeting, hopefully we can get everything approved so we can still implement it by July of 2020, which was the initial guideline, although everything's been pushed back to December because of this COVID, but I'm proud to say that we still were able to complete it ahead of time and have everything in place. So just wanted to give a shout out to all of the different departments at RTC for working together. Special shout out to Monica Carter, Ashley Mason. They did wonders with collecting all this information and analyzing it and putting everything together.
Well, there's nothing like the satisfaction of completing a term paper or a doctoral dissertation, Mr. Carter. What would be helpful to me, and perhaps you can do this in your next report, is to identify any key areas of safety and safety care and safety improvement that in the process of doing this you've discovered, where we're able to actually improve our capacity for maintaining safety. That's because this kind of study does always turn those up.
Exactly.
And that
sounds good.
Any further questions or comments? Yes, Julie.
So this is this plan across the country has been a challenge for many, many agencies to get together all the different elements. It's been very challenging and it's very complex. And it's not just about tracking, identifying when you've had accidents, but also doing root cause analysis, doing trend analysis, trying to find underlying causes. It's been pretty impressive to me to see the team come together and how much of this has been in place and has already been in place for GRTC. What you'll see is we're going to send you the policy in the next few days, so you'll have a chance to review it. When Tony comes back next month, he'll go through the relevant points of it, but it is required for you to understand what's in it and to adopt it This is just a kind of an introduction to say, you'll be seeing it, you'll see the policy, and we do have to have that approval before I can sign off on it. You probably would have gotten it earlier, but everything, of course, is delayed because COVID.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we're not delaying in implementing anything that will enhance our safety until we approve the plan. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and that is an excellent point. A lot of these elements are already in play and are being put into play even without the formal adoption. We're already advancing these.
Of course.
And that's through Tony and his team.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carter. Good work.
Thank you.
All right. Van Pool program update. Hi, Vaughn.
Hi, good morning again. GRTC and RideFinders, we have non-exclusive contracts with 3 van pool vendors for what is entitled our van fleet. GRTC provides the subsidy payments according to the passenger size capabilities for these vendors for the NTD reporting at the following levels. These are flat rates. $325 for each 15, 14, 13, and 12 passenger size van pools. $300 for the 10, 9, and 7 passenger sizes. Pre-COVID-19, the RVan fleet size as of March 2020 was at 147 vehicles, with an average total GRTC monthly subsidy of $45,450. Due to the shutdown of and greatly reduced operations of regional businesses as a direct impact of COVID-19, many of the van pools ceased to commute for an indefinite period. These van pools were parked but not terminated pending resumption of services as businesses reopened and continue to do so. The commuting fleet was subsequently decreased by 63% down to 55 van pools. This meant that the contracted subsidy to each vendor from GRTC would also be reduced accordingly. All vendors solicited financial support from GRTC to help with the overhead maintenance costs of keeping the parked vehicles in a holding pattern versus terminating the van pools and facing the dilemma of starting from ground zero when the new normal returns. GRTC and RideFinders, we work together with the finance department to request and get proposals from all the vendors on what financial assistance they were seeking. Like I said, it's 3 vendors, and 2 of those vendors are locally minority owned. One is a male and the other is owned by a female, and they're small businesses. One of these local businesses would face the risk of ceasing to operate if budgeted subsidies for park van pools were reduced or eliminated. After careful deliberation, looking at the proposals and consulting with other agencies as well, and a demonstration of goodwill and in recognition of the value of the van pool program as a vital part of the GRTC organization, the vendors were advised that GRTC would provide level subsidies through June 2020, equivalent to the pre-COVID subsidies despite the drop in active van pools during the COVID-19 shutdowns. Maintaining level funding of subsidies totaling $45,450 will not impact GRTC's FY 2020 budget. The FY 2021 subsidy levels will be evaluated on a monthly basis starting in July 2020 based on the rate of resumption of van pools and total available budget. And all vendors have expressed appreciation for this support and collaboration. Were there any questions?
Thank you very much for that report. And it's good that we don't lose our people during this process.
Yes.
So I know that's it's tough for everybody, but it's good that we were able to do that.
I'm very grateful, and they certainly are. So thank you as well. Yes, they are. Thank you as well.
Thank you for the way you take care of this. All right.
We appreciate it.
Yep. Julie.
And Mr. Campbell, at this point, we would like to either at this point request an amendment to the agenda here or under the financial report action items. There's a last minute purchase of a Pulse bus.
Yeah, let's take it down there at the financial report action items. Okay. So thank you. So if we could move forward now to the financial report. Performance, Barry Herring. Hi, Barry.
Good morning. How is everyone?
Good.
Good. I'm giving you the financial report as of May 31, 2020. You do have in your packet a summary that I've included with the narrative. The overall net budget variance for the revenues and expenses, this is year-to-date combined, was an unfavorable $722,000. And as you will notice on the reporting, I gave you a month-over-month over the past couple of months, and including this month, you've seen the kind of steady decline, and primarily this is COVID related. As you can see from March, we had a favorable variance of $594,000. In April, it declined down to just $15,000. And then as of the end of May, as I said, a negative $722,000. And primarily that's related to the lack of customer revenue as we went fare free. And I'll now move into the expenses. The expense cost center, had an unfavorable variance for this current month of $162,000. Of the 7 cost centers, there were 2 that were unfavorable. That was maintenance and transportation. Maintenance was $139,000. That was primarily due to the fleet repairs, which I noted in previous months, how that has been trending up, as well as some lubricants and fluids, which is part of the maintenance that we perform on our vehicles each month. And then also in transportation is the salaries and wages. Tim mentioned in his operations report where we have a challenge with the operators when there's testing and people have to be out. We try to cover the routes as much as we can, and we have to use whatever available resource we can with transportation supervisors and what have you, and that will boost the cost up. So with the paying of the people being out as well as trying to cover service as best we can, that increases the salaries and wages, overtime, as well as just additional service for the make and pull out. And also, in the other expense areas that might be a little bit trending would be the diesel fuel we had mentioned before. Even though we got a favorable rating or pricing rather on this most recent contract, it still is not going to be enough to kind of put us flat for the year, and that has increased by 42% and $183,000. As I move forward throughout the report, we also put an item there for CARES Act and COVID-related expenses. I showed you the lost revenue as well as the COVID-related expenses of $1,032,000 for the expenses and 1.1 for the revenue, which is a total of $2.2 million. And as we manage through this, the good news is that we do have CARES Act money that will cover that funding, rather that lack of expense or increased expense and lack of revenue. And so we should end the year, obviously, in a unfavorable net position, but those funding sources will cover the variance. Also included the agent report for your information.
Good morning.
Hi, Tony.
Sorry, did I hear someone? Okay, all right. Okay, as I move forward with the report, I also wanted to give you the FY 2020 audit update. We have begun the Old Dominion Transit Employees Disability and Retirement Allowance Plan, which is essentially the pension plan audit, and this is done much earlier this year, so we have a timetable that we're trying to meet, and we're going very well. Certain interviews have already started with the GRTC and the RideFinders audit, which is the pre-planning part, but it is also moving very favorably. We haven't had any hiccups at this point, so we should be on schedule for the end of the year. The regional transit funding, I wanted to give you a little bit of update on that as well. And speaking with several sources around the city and the stakeholders, I do understand that there's a steering committee that is set up for the CVTA, and they're putting the structure in place as this thing begins next month. The funding from this transit funding plan is going to be coming from 2 sources, the sales and use tax as well as the gasoline tax. Now, the good news is the gasoline tax will start its collections beginning July 1, and we should receive some type of distribution sometime in August. But the sales and use tax will begin its collection for October 1, and obviously that's affected by COVID pandemic. And so that funding will be collected October 1, and there's some discussion that distribution may be made quarterly, which will put our distribution sometime in January. Now, this is what I have as of now, and as we get more updates, I will provide to the board and the others appropriately. That's all I have. In case there's any questions, I'm happy to respond.
Barry, this is Danny. You say we'll put this money in a separate bank account and a journal ledger account. How will this be reflected in the financials, I guess, as the money comes? It will be a separate line item for revenue and expenses related to that, or?
Absolutely. We will keep that distinguished so that the board and any reviewer can see how this impact is going. So we'll see a line for the revenue, and we'll also now, even though it's going to be supporting the overall operation, there will be dispenses dispersed. We'll have a separate cost page that we can just distinguish what that page or what those funding will cover.
So you have, in terms of the separate bank account, what's the rationale for that?
Well, we wanted to have a distinguishment such that when the monies come in, we'll have a separate reconciliation so that it would just kind of tie in with the overall financial reporting. I mean, it's just a way of keeping it as clean as possible and making sure that there's any opportunity for anyone to look at or audit or review, they will see that very clearly.
Is it fair to say then the revenue will go in, the money goes into the bank account there, and as expenses related to this will come out and go into the general fund to pay for the expenses associated with it?
Yes. Sense? Now, as I said, the funding will be incorporated with the overall operations of the agency, but there will be distinguishments, set up so that it can be viewed separately if it's need to.
Okay.
We also have the same thing with paratransit. It's incorporated with our overall report, but there is a separate cost page that shows exactly how those expenses are accounted for.
Okay.
Any further questions? Mr. Herring, thank you. Yeah, hey, Gary.
Question. Julie and Barry, I'm just curious about the funding that's supposed to come, the relief funding for COVID, that federal money that's coming in. How is that going to show up? When does it show up?
Well, we will account for that separately as well. We do have a separate line that we show for any kind of CARES Act reimbursement. I mean, it's typically 5307 money from FTA, so it's the same, section of funding that we get, although it's distinguished by CARES Act. But yeah, we will have that distinguished as well. So if there's any reporting that's needed to segregate what that number looks like, we're able to provide that.
Yeah, Jim.
That grant has been submitted to FTA, has gone through the proper channels, and we have been awarded that money. So effectively, that money is ready to be spent. The FTA did agree for the different categorizations for how we would be spending it, for the maintenance, the loss of revenues, for the increased operations. Those were all approved by FTA based on the discussions we've been having with you for the last 3 months.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So we submit specific applications periodically under different categories to CARES, and what's the lag time on receipt of funds from them?
Well, it's almost immediate. As Julie said, the grant was executed in last part of May, and as we request fundings through our ECHO drawdown process, the funds are placed in our bank account within a couple of days.
Thank you.
So normally we receive $5307 every year as a part of a general apportionment that we have to then put in a grant in. We tell them how we're going to spend it, and we draw that down. This CARES Act money is actually 5307 money. It's just a special distribution of that 5307.
Any further questions? Mr. Herring, thank you for dealing with great big zeros that show up and carrying this forward.
Yes,
I have one more question. Looking at statement of income, what is considered non-transportation income?
I'm sorry?
What is considered non-transportation income?
In this case, the non-transportation income would be our, miscellaneous type incomes. If we were to sell any kind of scrap metal or anything along those lines, or maybe ID replacements, things like that. And now one other thing that's in there, that's why the number is so large. We did receive a payment from the Department of, DEQ, I think a month or so ago, and that payment was for the remediation of the old Davis property. And so that one lump amount was put there. That's why that number is as large. Typically, it's not as large as that.
You're looking at the budget, and the actual was quite different. Okay.
Yeah, that was I'm thinking around $144,000 that we received.
Good pickup, Danny, and thank you. Any further questions? All right. So Tanya, I think, thanks, Barry. Tanya has, Ms. Thompson has recent and upcoming procurements.
Yes, sir. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Before you is the same list as I presented in May. The only difference is that now we're back, getting back into the groove of the procurements that we wanted to get out posted prior to COVID. So what we're actively working on now is the procurements for the wrecker, landscaping and lawn service for the BRT stations, the ERP system consultant, program management services, and of course, buses. I want to continue to encourage you to make recommendations for different sources that you're aware of. We welcome just open competition, and we welcome your recommendations. So feel free to reach out to me. And that's all I have, unless there's any questions.
I'm looking for the wrecker. That's not on this list, is it?
Yes, it's the very first line on the list.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. The barrier guards are working now?
I'm actually going to present that to you in a few minutes.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you for that report.
Yes, sir.
Any questions? And we have action items.
Good morning, everyone. Once again, first action item up is the Versa insurance renewal policy. Versa is Virginia Risk Sharing Association insurance policy. They handle they're the carrier for our property, boiler machine, and workers' compensation. The insurance policies are up for renewal. In order to renew these policies, it will cost $446,555. This proposal is actually coming in $24,000 cheaper than last year. The biggest difference is about a $30,000 decrease in workers' compensation premium. This is a tribute to discounts we usually get for participating in the online university and training courses, as well as staying in compliance with their requirements on reporting and overall claims handling. Also, GRTC's workers' compensation's modifier is at 32%. Underwriters like to see that under 50%. This is based on a low claims ratio. While we had a moderate amount of workers' compensation claims reported, the number of claims that were actually compensable were low. I request the recommendation of the board to renew these policies based on Versa's proposal of $446,555.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, you've heard the request for approval of the insurance policy. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? It's approved. Thank you. Ms. Thompson.
Okay. We continue to follow CDC and transit industry guidance to ensure the health and safety of all of our GRTC staff. One way to provide additional safeguards against COVID-19 is to install Lexan glass partitions in the operator's area on our bus and paratransit fleet. Staff reached out to several for quotes to provide the materials and installation of plexiglass barriers. Ace Glass was able to meet delivery needs and offered the best value at $145,974. The cost includes both materials and installation. Ace is a small, locally owned business and is interested in pursuing SLAM and or DBE certification. So we do have Antoinette Haynes working with them to help facilitate that process. This purchase will be funded with CARES Act funds. Our recommendation is that the Board of Directors authorizes the CEO to issue a purchase order to Ace Glass for $145,974 for the purchase of materials and installation of driver barriers on the bus and paratransit fleet.
I thought we'd already installed some of these.
No, we had them work with us because they had to customize this glass for us. So what they've installed is a prototype. Our maintenance department has worked closely with them to find a solution that provides a barrier, but also helps with the glare. So we had to work with them over the course of the last couple of weeks to make sure that they produced a product that would work for us.
So if we give you approval right now, we can proceed with this, correct?
Yes, sir.
Could I have a motion to approve this, please?
So moved.
Any further questions? All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? No, it's approved. Thank you very much.
I have one quick question. How long will it take for them to complete this?
If we get all of the materials in, which has been a problem across the U.S., just getting everything in. But if we get everything in, we're hoping to have everything completed by the beginning of August.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, this is important, and it's taken us a longer time than we wanted, I know, for this.
Yes.
If I can add a little bit to that, Mr. Chairman, just to clarify that the procurement team and maintenance team has been trying to get these through Gillick for a national vendor for over 2 months. Since the beginning of this pandemic, they've been trying to get them. Gillick just has not been able to deliver because they have been out of stock across the nation. Tanya and her team were able to find that local vendor. We were hoping to put this through much more quickly with the emergency procurement allowances that the board authorized between you and I to do that. And we were moving in that process of moving that forward. While we went to go get them installed, again, as Tanya mentioned, that full barrier that we were looking at presented a significant safety issue to our drivers, so we had to have them redesigned before we'd have them deployed. As we're having them redesigned, it provided us an opportunity to bring this to the full board, and so that's why you're seeing it today, is that delay. Instead of doing the emergency and getting it signed, we now have the opportunity for the entire board to look at it.
Good. Any further questions? Thank you for getting that through. I know our people will be glad to have it. Next item is the big deal, right? No, we got another one. Oh,
yes.
Want to do the
Tanya,
bus?
Yes. I can do the bus now.
Do you want me to share the screen? If I can share this screen, I can show you the action item.
Yeah, that would be fine. Okay. As you are aware, on May 29th, 2020, a BRT Pulse bus was vandalized while in service, resulting in the total loss of the vehicle. Staff is in the process of assessing the need to replace and add buses. It is necessary to react to the immediate need of a replacement bus for the BRT service. The Commonwealth of Virginia Department of General Services, Division of Purchases and Supply currently has a contract with Gillick LLC for a 40-foot BRT bus that we may utilize. The unit price for this bus is $533,525. This includes the producer price index increase of 10.85%. There will be an additional cost of $8,411 for a 3-year extended warranty on the engine. Current pricing excludes surveillance camera systems and CAD AVL equipment that we put on our entire fleet. These items will be acquired in a separate procurement. This purchase will be funded with federal and local funds. Compensation from GRTC's insurance company may be received upon the completion of an investigation and a determination of applicable insurance coverage. Our recommendation is that the Board of Directors authorizes the CEO to issue a purchase order to Gillick LLC in the amount of $541,936 for one 40-foot CNG powered low floor transit bus with a 3-year extended engine warranty. Are there any questions?
Numbers you mentioned are not aligned with this information attachment, but anyway.
Yeah, the numbers are a little different, Tanya.
You're exactly right. Well, what you have to do is you have to add the unit price plus the extended warranty, and then you'll get the number that we're asking for at the bottom.
Okay.
That should be right.
All right, you've heard the report. Can I have a motion to approve the purchase of this bus?
Also
So moved. Second.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? And my understanding is we're able to get this thing hopefully within 6 months. Is that right?
The goal is to get it here in service first quarter of next year, early first quarter.
And this will be pulse painted, right?
Yes, sir. Pulse branded. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, Julie.
You'll be able to see my screen now for the FY 2021 operational budget presentation. Okay. So for the past 7 months, we have been reviewing the proposed FY 2021 operational budget. 7 months ago, I presented a baseline budget to the board that was amended last month for a proposed operational budget to go into 2021. Let me see if I can make this work here. There we go. This presentation is broken into 4 parts. We're going to try and keep it short and sweet since we have had these discussions for 7 months. Specifically, we'll talk about the budget policy and assumptions for the FY 2021 budget that were discussed at the last board meeting, the use of the COVID relief funding for FY 2020 specifically, the proposed FY 2021 budget, which also includes embedded in it a certain amount of the COVID CARES Act relief funds, and next steps. To start with the budget policy assumptions, the budget that you're about to review as a proposal does include the CARES Act funding, included partially in FY 20 and partially in FY 2021 to cover the lost revenues associated with COVID, and also with the increased expenses associated with COVID and our new reality of how we need to operate so it increases our baseline. It does include for ongoing budgeting for zero spare service throughout all of FY 2021. While that does not mean that we will stay zero fare throughout the entire year, it allows us for a conservative approach to budgeting so that the unknowns associated with COVID and other scenarios are accurately reflected in our budget so that we do not over account for revenues and find ourselves in a shortfall mid-year. The budget does also include a reduction of local funding in FY 2021 for both our Richmond and Enrico funding partners based on the budgets that they have provided to us and that they have adopted for FY 2021. And it does also account for the regional funds, the CBTA funds, a discounted amount that I discussed with you last month of about $10 million. Those are also included in the revenues. However, as you'll see in the expenses, they're offset by having those put into a special reserve, since there are some unknowns about how we can spend that money and when.
Julie, you're a little bit garbled. Is there anything you can do about that?
I can speak more slowly.
It's not you. It's something technical.
Okay, I will speak slower. I do tend to speak quickly. And
No,
I'll bring the phone closer. Is that better at all?
That sounded a little better. Yeah, we're getting a kind of a double sound or a feedback in it.
Yeah, it's a little better if you speak a little slower.
Okay. I'm looking at my phone thinking I might pick up my handset, but then I'm afraid if I do that, it doesn't work.
Julie, it's not speakerphone. It's just the love of the internet and technology, and it's kind of like when you have a bad cell connection. Hopefully it'll clear itself up. It's out of our control.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you. If I could ask Mr. Chairman, if I sound garbled, if you could raise your hand, I'll use that as a visual cue to stop and wait for the internet to, is that okay?
Yep.
Thank you, sir. Okay. So should I start back with the discussion of expenses?
I think we're all right so far.
Okay. Okay. So the expenses, the policy assumptions for the expenses are that we would increase our baseline budget to account for a new normal, increased bus and facility cleaning to continue beyond COVID, and to also account for the higher level of staffing the full complement of staffing that before we believed 7 months ago would take us some time to hire and to maintain. That since we have done that more quickly than anticipated, that is included in this budget. This budget does not include the increased services we talked about last month or the increased services we talked about at the beginning of this presentation. We'll discuss a little bit more. And then it does provide for 2 reserve funds. One, a $10 million reserve fund that's associated with the CVTA funds, and a $3.6 million reserve fund that is associated with CARES Act money for the emergency pandemic response needs. Specifically, moving into the use of the CARES Act money in FY 2020 for the rest of this fiscal year through the end of June and how we've been using it to date. This is the presentation. This is the same slide that you saw last month, where the first 2 lines account for the lost fare box revenues we've been seeing over the course of this year with 0 fares. It also includes the cost for the PPEs, the COVID testing, the driver shields, the bus cleaning. These are estimated costs. It does include the frontline staff bonus that we already provided for the March-April timeframe of $250,000. And it does also include, should you approve this, an additional frontline staff bonus of in the total amount of $810,000 for the April, May, and June timeframe, so that the entire coverage of the COVID response from March 1 until June 30th has provided a frontline bonus for our staff. Now, last month, I presented this slide to you for FY 2021, where the baseline budget of $56 million is what you saw 6 months ago. This one talked about the permanent cleaning, which was an additional approximately $4 million. The additional service frequency, which we estimated at that time for FY 2021 would be an additional $5 million. And then the additional of frontline pays of either $1 or $2 per hour equivalent, which was an additional $1 million or $2 million. For the sake of conversation last month, we focused on that last column. However, the recommendation will be actually to bring forward the first column into the budget adoption. And that looks like this, where the very last, the most right-hand column is that first column I was just discussing of expenses, where our total expenses, total operating expenses, is approximately $60 million, but our total balanced budget is $73.8 million. What this allows is it allows us to have a conservative and transparent approach to our budget, where we are accounting for the expenses that are known, the increased operational costs of the sick pay, the cleaning costs of the buses, the full staffing to be embedded as known costs in our budget. And it takes the unknowns that we're not able to account for, the CVTA money in the amount of $10 million, and sets that aside so that when we are ready to be able to increase our operations, when we have the staff and we have the vehicles and we have the plan, as we discussed earlier in this board meeting, we could then activate that $10 million with the approval of the TPO and the CVTA to be able to put that service on the street. So it reserves it there for that use. It also includes the $3.6 million, which is the remainder of the CARES Act money that isn't already adopted and approved in the budget for lost expenses, lost income and increased expenses, into another reserve fund. That $3.6 million could be used if we find that we need additional levels of cleaning, if we find that we need additional levels of PPE beyond what we've already accounted for and expected. If the board wishes to enact a frontline pay in 2021, if COVID continues throughout the year and a vaccine isn't found, this 3.6 is the money that we have, the flexibility that the board has to be able to respond to COVID in FY21. And there are no questions about this. I'll move on to the next slide, which is the budget adoption process, or I can pause here.
So do you have questions about what Julie is proposing here? All right. You've done a good job of walking us through this over the months as well as preparing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I
So
have
the
a
final
question
slide. Sorry.
regarding the
Yes, sir.
reserve funds, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Use of the reserve funds, would that require board approval?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
This allows for, I believe it allows for a better ability to be transparent in the use of that money, whereas if that money was embedded into our budget, I don't believe that transparency would be there on how we're using it.
No, I agree.
All right, are you ready for discussion and approval here?
The last point, sir, is that I would ask for specifically, I have a couple of key requests. One is that if this is adopted, we will come back with a capital budget in the next month to look at the purchase of buses to try and plan for the use of that $10 million and for the increased service needs of the region, and other capital items such as the pulse station modifications. All of those would be included in a new capital budget to respond to this. But the specific recommendations that I'm asking for authorization on at this time would be that the Board of Directors authorize the expenditures of the state relief funding, the CARES Act funding we received to date, and the amount of close to $35 million for FY20 would spend up to $3.5 million, $3.6 million as presented in this presentation. That further, that you adopt the FY21 budget as presented in the amount of $73.9 million. And finally, that based on this budget, you authorize the CEO to enter into operational contracts with the City of Richmond, Chesterfield County, and Henrico County, and other funding partners in the amount of this budget.
Okay, so you all have heard that. Would somebody make a motion so we can have discussion on this?
So moved.
All right, second, please.
Second.
All right, so Julie, I know that we're excited that we're going to be able to do something more for our frontline workers in this first period of the COVID response under the fiscal year 2020. So could you just be specific about what we're doing there?
Absolutely. So far, what we did initially with the first allotment of money that was within the discretion of the board chair and the CEO is that we spent approximately $250,000 to the frontline staff, people who had a direct interaction with the public or direct interaction with cleaning behind the public. Our operators, our bus cleaners, our shelter cleaners on the pulse stations received a bonus of $600 minus taxes, a certain amount of taxes. And the people that were the support staff who were required to come in and also interact on a daily basis who were not able to telework, our mechanics and our supervisors who were helping that, they received a frontline bonus of $350. And that included our paratransit staff as well that are through First Transit. This next allotment would provide a range of bonuses depending on whether someone worked part-time or full-time from March 1 through June 30th, where they could receive as an operator between approximately $700 bonus to $1,500 as an additional bonus based on hours worked in the field throughout that period. It would also include an additional bonus of, I believe, between $300 and $700 for the support staff who supported that for that March 1 through June 30th. And that would also include paratransit, and that would be based on whether they were full-time or part-time and the time they worked out in the field. We are continuing to provide anyone full pay when they are put on quarantine or when they are put on to sick leave, and it does not come out of their sick leave pool. So if someone is sick based on COVID, they're not using their sick reserves. We're using the CARES Act money and the Family First Corona Response Act money to cover those costs. This would specifically be for people who are on the field working and interacting.
So a driver who worked full time would be getting up to $1,500 as an additional.
$1,500.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Is that a one-time bonus, or it's not broken down. You say you're going to break it down by the number of hours worked.
Yes, sir. It's equivalent if someone worked full-time between March 1st and June 30th and didn't take any time off, they stayed. For their regular hours, it equates to, in total, between the first bonus and this one, over $2 an hour.
Okay. Well,
but it is not an hourly bonus. I mean, it does translate into that, though. Yes.
Okay, would this be a lump sum or would it be per paycheck?
It would be a lump sum amount that would be provided we're looking to put that into effect. So it would, through the June 30th timeframe. So it would be accounting for all of the remainder of FY 2020. So they should receive it. I'm going to say this, and finance is going to have to jump through some hoops to make it happen. But they should receive it before the 4th of July.
Okay. All right, I think I understand it. You're breaking up. Audio is not good here.
I apologize. I will, if I speak a little more slowly, then maybe the internet can catch up.
I don't think it's you.
I don't know, Julie. I guess the internet has to catch up with you, and that's you really do stay out front. More questions about this? So I'd just like to kind of express what I know is true, which is that we really do want to support our people who've been doing all this work. And if we pass this budget, its immediate effect will be to give what money we have available to our employees for the effort and risk and courage that they've shown. And I also want to note that our top priority from the beginning, in addition to trying to do the best we can for worker safety, which has always been true, has been to try to make sure that people stayed employed, and that anything that happened in terms of people's having to be absent for whatever purpose during this COVID thing, we tried to cover so that folks didn't just really get in trouble. And I think that was right and is the most important, so that we can all keep ourselves going. So I appreciate this work and these priorities. Any further discussion? I'd like to have a motion. We've had the motion to approve the budget, which includes Julie's notification that we will be dealing with capital next time. And I think we're ready to go. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thanks, George. All opposed? All right, the budget's approved. Good work, Julie.
Mr. Chairman, may I just ask for clarification that approval accounted for both the use of the FY20, use of the money of the FY21 budget, and my approval to go into contract with our partners?
That is my understanding. Is that how you all understood that?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Next item is what here? Your report.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, it's been a month. Most of what I have to report has already been reported out by staff. Just to make sure that we're all transparent, there have been 14 total cases of COVID among our active workforce since the beginning of this pandemic. We continue to closely track it for the safety of our staff or community. We really, through all the safety tracking we have done so far, we have been looking very closely to see if there are point clusters within our agency that we could be able to define and to be able to contain. And to date, we have not found any clusters. We have not found any spread of the infections within our staff that we could identify. We have been very active about quarantining people as they've been expressing symptoms, being tested, and the people around them with our social cleaning. So we are hopeful that we will be able to maintain that level of quarantining and control of the disease as it spreads throughout the community as we reopen. But it is an ongoing and a high effort, and it does significantly increase our ability to put service on the road. As for every case that we have that is positive, we are quarantining between 2 to 10 people who may be in contact. And when you have 14 cases, while many of, I believe approximately 4 of those have returned to work, that means that there are people who are out sick and quarantined associated with those to make sure that we don't have that spread. And we will continue to have service impacted as COVID remains in our community. As you noted in the beginning, masks, the wearing of masks and the social distancing on our buses continues to be problematic. And so until we have a way that we can protect our riders and enforce the use of wearing masks, then we will continue to maintain that social distancing and wearing of masks of our own staff to keep them separated and keep them as safe as possible away from any rider who might board with the virus. The good news is that when we're looking across the country, across the world, when you look at France and Japan in particular, they're finding that the transit systems in those areas are actually safer than a lot of other places such as restaurants, because many people, when they get onto public transit, don't talk. And we know that one of the major ways this is spread is through aerolization. Oh, I can't even say the word. When you speak, the virus spreads. And so when you're on transit, when you wear the mask and you're not talking, the risk goes down. So that is encouraging, and we hope that we can help to encourage our passengers to have silence is golden and help protect them in that way as well. We can't enforce people to not talk, of course, but if we can spread the word that ride in silence where possible, it will keep that risk lower. We are excited that our on-site testing was so successful in identifying that there are so few people in our agency who are carrying the disease or are pre-symptomatic. We'll keep on with that testing. Unfortunately, it does present something of a catch-22 for us in that as our operators feel safer and they feel more protected, as we see with the public, people tend to minimize the risk. And so we need to create that balance of tension where people maintain that safety. They keep their guard up to keep the infection rate low, but also to know that they feel protected and safe. It's a balance.
Julie,
yes, sir.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
Okay. I was going to move on to the protests and marches, the protest marches.
Okay. Out of the 14 cases you said that came back positive, how many of those are hospitalized, or were any of them hospitalized?
Yes, some of them were hospitalized. My information today is that 4 of them were hospitalized. Of those, 1 of them has underlying conditions that's requiring significant rehabilitation. The rest of them are in recovery, and it's looking positive. But yes, there were 4 that were hospitalized.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Let's see. So the protest marches also is one of those issues that we're trying to balance very, very carefully. The past 2.5 weeks have been very challenging for us because we have the priority to protect our staff and protect our community and to maintain our service for our riders who still need to get to work. But at the same time, we want to balance that with the needs to stay in the support of our region and their demands for equity and justice. By the very nature of the protest, there's no way for us to be able to predict with confidence where the marches might shift and where something might become more volatile and turn those protests to violence. So balancing having service on the street to support the community and yet give the protesters the space to peacefully protest has been quite a challenge for us over the past several weeks. Our operators are adhering to their schedules and as best they can. They are doing an incredibly, I would say, terrifying task of sometimes facing the unknown of Will they be surrounded by protesters, and will those protesters become violent? And what we have seen over and over the past 2 weeks is the protesters have been peaceful, but to be in that environment is still very, would make the most reasonable person fear when we know that one of our buses burned. But they have been out there, they have been supportive, they have been continuing to stay on schedule the best they can, and our supervisors not only have been helping them to detour, to watch the protesters as they march, and to detour our buses around or to delay them, but then our supervisors have also gone out where we've detoured to pick up riders who might be stranded so that people aren't left behind. And I want to acknowledge that USERV also did help us on that Monday night on June 1st, where we pulled service in very quickly to try and avoid the curfew and possible violence in the protests. USERV helped us to get some of our stranded riders where they needed to go. As our buses were off the street and they were stranded, we got them home. I believe we actually were able to get 8 people who called us back home and out of the way of the protesters. Quick timeline, just so we have it on the record, is May 29th is when the protests hit the streets of Richmond. That was the night that one of our Pulse buses did burn. We reduced service on May 30th significantly. We canceled service on May 31st as we still were facing unknowns about how the protests would advance, whether they would become more violent or less. June 1st is when the curfew, we pulled our service in early, leaving some of our riders stranded. USERV helped us pick them up and get them where they needed to go so that they were able to move out of the way of the protesters. On June 2nd, after the protests turned very peaceful, we returned to normal service and tried to keep it as dependable as possible while we stayed out of the way of the marches. And we do have the ongoing detours and route cancellations and picking up riders wherever we can. With that, I am very proud of the service that our staff has put out, not only facing a state of emergency for a pandemic, but also facing a state of emergency for protests. Again, these are unprecedented times. With that, I have one more thing to present, and this is a good news. Not only did RideFinders receive an award from the Virginia Transit Association, our marketing department received one as well. So they're going to officially announce it at their conference later this fall, which was canceled, unfortunately, because of COVID. But specifically, and I'd like to read this if I may, because I don't know that I'll do it justice if I don't read it. It's pretty short. Is that at the VTA 2020 annual conference, the winner of VTA's Outstanding Public Transportation Marketing Award is GRTC Transit System, who submitted their Route 111, Route 1 Falling Creek Tyler campaign. The Route 111 is an essential new service that travels 7.6 miles throughout Chesterfield County. It connects people to jobs, housing, education, and to the greater GRTC bus network. The purpose of the route, the marketing campaign, was to educate the public and build excitement. With this in mind, GRTC created Spanish translations of the educational videos and commercial spots. Collateral materials were designed for different literacy levels, and as a result, this award-winning campaign reached a diverse audience, including Spanish-speaking population and people from a cross-section of socioeconomic backgrounds. Despite the service launching during COVID-19 pandemic, ridership has met and is meeting expectations, providing this new service to meet the essential needs of the community. I'm just so proud that this has happened, and it was noted that I believe our marketing department has won this award now 3 years in a row for their excellent work. So it is good.
Well, that's wonderful. Carrie, that's an interesting picture you have of yourself there, and we're very excited about that award and for you and your colleagues. It's wonderful.
So to complete my report, I just want to make a quick statement that says I no longer know what normal is, but I look forward to finding out what it looks like here shortly, because it certainly won't be what it was. And with that, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that concludes my report for June.
Well, thank you. Questions of Julie on this? Julie, we did get a contract for testing, right? We
Yes,
put
sir.
it in, yeah, significant contract. So we're making it available all the time for our people now.
And for the contract, the testing, just to clarify, the testing here is for people who are not sick or are not known to be sick. It's for people who are asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic. Anyone who has symptoms is asked to immediately go get tested at BetterMed or another site, not to come on to here. So they're not waiting to get tested, because there are discrete intervals at which we can do it, but it is for us to be able to pick up asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic people before they enter into service.
I neglected to say, when you made your final budget presentation, that from where I started on this board to where we are now in terms of budget preparation and work with the board on the budget preparation, is just an enormous achievement, and I am so grateful that we've reached the point that we have, and that you've brought us there with Barry's help. I have a resolution of thanks to the staff. I don't know if anybody else has a copy of it or not. I am the only one with it. Okay, I'm going to read this to you and ask for your approval of it, or ask for somebody to offer it once I read it. The Board of the Greater Richmond Transit Company expresses its gratitude and admiration for the frontline staff of GRTC, as they have maintained the transit service essential for Richmond during the COVID-19 pandemic. They have faced with courage, kindness, and imagination a situation for which no one was fully prepared. We are grateful as well for innovative ways in which our management team has worked to keep the service going and to provide as promptly and thoroughly as possible the emergency supplies needed to support our frontline staff. We affirm the decision to keep employment secure and to support anyone who is quarantined on our behalf. It has not been easy for anyone, and there are still major challenges ahead. But we know we have been blessed with a very excellent community at GRTC. As a board, we pledge ourselves to do everything we can to support the work and safety of this excellent community of public service. And if anybody would be willing to move that, I would appreciate it.
So moved.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any further conversation on this? And Julie, did I send you a text of this? I did, didn't I?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Ben.
Yeah.
You may want to change Richmond to either Richmond, Henrico, and Chesterfield, or RVA, I would say.
Okay, let's do RVA. It's easy. Thanks.
I accept the amendment.
Thank you. Any further conversation? And I mean it, by the way. I just think it's incredible what you guys have. And I do know those drivers out there. I just can't believe, the daily kind of unmarked courage of people to do what these people are doing, and to be willing to be dependable at a time of great personal risk.
Ben, we don't call them drivers, we call them operators.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Eldridge. Dang. All right. Any further conversation or correction? All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No. All right. So that is the, I don't have any further report. Braxton, George, are you working on a committee for me or for the board?
Okay. Say that again. I'm
nominating. You working on? You working on nominating?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I don't when we do a report on that.
Conversation with me.
Okay.
But I've pretty much talked to almost everybody. Just have one more person.
Yeah. If you haven't talked to George, please talk to George.
Okay.
Okay. I think that's all I've got. And so that means we can, let's see, how do I get this motion to get moved into the executive session?
There's
other
Bonnie,
business first. Any other business?
I just have a quick question on the conflicts of interest policy. Who do we email that to once we sign it?
Sorry.
You can email it to me, Angela Malloy.
Okay. And your email address?
So it's Angela, ANGELA dot Malloy, MALLOY at RideGRTC.com.
Ride GRTC.
Angela, did you get mine?
Yes, I did.
Okay, good.
Okay. Okay, Bonnie, thank you, Angela. What do we do now, Bonnie? Oh. I need a motion, right? Somebody's to go into executive session.
Yes, that's correct.
All right, does anybody have a copy of the motion?
Yeah, I can read it, Ben.
Thank you, Gary.
I move that the board hold a closed meeting pursuant to section 2.2-3711A7 of the Code of Virginia for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation where such consultation or briefing and open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? No. So we're going to move into a closed session. And Rob, you're going to take care of that for us?
Yes, sir. Now that we're ready, I'm going to make sure that everyone is out other than the board and the necessary members. I will be pausing the live stream, so this portion will not be streamed, but the YouTube stream will continue with no feed. And then Julie is going to let me know via text as soon as you're ready to go back public to read your next public portion. And then we will continue through until you wrap up going through that same process.
All right.
So I will let you know once we are private.
Good. Thank you.
So at this time, if we're done with everyone else that had to interact with the board, I'm going to ask all of you to leave the meeting now and drop off. And then I will work on pausing the stream. Please stand by.
Okay, Gary, you're on.
Ready? Okay, whereas
and we are now live.
Whereas the Board of Directors of GRTC has convened in closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the board hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public matters lawfully exempt from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certifying resolution applies. And only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the board. Witness the following vote of board members: Ben Campbell.
Aye.
George Braxton.
Aye.
Gary Armstrong. Aye. Eldridge Coles.
Aye.
Ian Milliken.
Aye.
Danny Smith.
Aye.
Motion is passed. Thank you very much. Now, can we have a motion to go back in?
Yeah. I got it. I move that the board hold a closed meeting pursuant to section 2.2-3711A29 of the Code of Virginia to discuss the scope and terms of a contract relating to the provision of transit services because discussion in an open session would adversely affect GRTC's bargaining position or negotiating strategy.
All right. It's been moved. A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. It's been passed, so we got to go back into closed session. Rob, thank you.
Yes, sir. I'm starting the process now for the YouTube stream. The board is going into closed executive session once again, and this stream will go back live once that session is complete. Stand by. I will let you know when you are in closed session.
And whereas section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the board hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public matters lawfully exempt from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certifying resolution applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the board. Witness the following vote of board members: Ben Campbell.
Aye.
George Braxton.
George.
George, you there?
You're on mute, George.
Aye.
Gary Armstrong, aye. Eldridge Coles.
Aye.
Ian Milliken.
Aye.
Danny Smith.
Aye.
All right.
All right, thank you. So that's been passed. Is there any further business for this board?
We need to tell Ian he's excused this time, but he needs to go back to his regular duties of making these motions.
That is
Yeah.
for sure.
Right, Ian. No more sloughing this stuff off.
I'll work on memorizing it.
Okay. All right. And any further business? If not, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for your work, all of you, and your prayers. And here we
And
go.
thank you, Julie, for everything you're doing in terms
Yeah,
of
really, Julie.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad I got the suit on today. That's an accomplishment.
Okay. All righty. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.